Yeast extract.
All I'm doing here is just a little visual prop. Thank you.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another one of our season chats. This time we are going to be focusing on the Trial of a Time Lord, season 23. If you're new here, don't forget to click subscribe and like and all the other sort of, social media things that we love. I'm P-Bal, and I'm joined today by...
James.
And I'm Jason. But I haven't come up on the camera. Hi, there I am. Hello, I'm Jason.
The Matrix screen is slowing.
It is. I see James is in the Matrix there. I'm quite impressed with that.
I am.
Is it a future incarnation? Oh, that's spoilers, isn't it? We haven't got there yet.
No, we haven't got there yet. There's plenty to go before we get there.
That is plenty to do before we get there. Our first story, we're going to use the accepted titles, I think, before we get any hating on people saying it's not the right title. Parts 1 to 4, Doctor Who and the Mysterious Planet. Who would like to kick us off with the season opener?
Or as I like to call it, carry on up the black light converter.
If only it were a carry on. If only they'd just gone the whole hog.
It's kind of, you just got to the end of the carry on season. It's, you've seen it all before and it's not very funny. Mysterious Planet. I'll start with a positive. It's only 4 episodes long. Jason's face.
I'm sorry, but we're only even minutes into this, and that's the best thing you can say about this.
No, I haven't got on to Dibby yet. Hang on, you just have to wait a moment. It's got Jane Sims in it. It's got Glenn Murphy as Dibber, who's a nice bit of eye candy. It is a run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story. The story in itself is okay, but I guess the whole package. I know, Paul, you just said we're going to look at 1 to 4, but the whole overriding story arc for this season is obviously the trial part, and I feel that where those bits interject, so the beginning and then through the stories, and we'll probably talk about this in subsequent episodes, I feel it kind of ruins the story because you're cutting backwards and forwards between what's happening and the trial. If you didn't have that, I'd probably like the story a little bit more. It's not the best story, but it's got a good cast. There's a few things going on underneath the surface, but it's okay.
Stop the Matrix here. I'm going to stop the Matrix. Now, this is my first contentious thing about Doctor Who and the Trial of a Time Lord. It's not a trial, is it? It's an independent inquiry. So it is actually not even the trial of a Time Lord. It is the independent inquiry of a Time Lord. Did nobody question that in the office? If we're going to put him on trial, but maybe for the first 8 episodes or so, it should be an independent inquiry rather than an actual trial. And it does shift sometimes. Sometimes they're like, oh, you're in peril of your life. It's like, well, he's in peril of his life for an independent inquiry into meddling. And I think you're right. I think your point there as well, and I think it affects the next story more. It's difficult to sort of segregate sometimes. But mysteriously, it is that thing when it keeps cutting to the trial room and you get moments where Linda Bellingham, for instance, goes, this is really boring. Why are you showing us this? And it's like, oh, this is the story. I mean, it's a bit awkward when you've got the trial room basically going, this is really irrelevant. Can we cut to a sequence now that's got some bearing on something? And it's like, oh, you're slightly tearing your own story apart.
Yeah, it's very jarring. I mean, I don't know if the trial was tacked on or whether they decided that the trial was there right from the beginning, but it does feel very shoehorned in. And it takes you away from the action. You're into the story, and then all of a sudden you're literally ripped out of that story. And then there's some superfluous stuff that goes on around that, that then pushes you back in. And as you said, it's a trial that's not a trial. It tries to be a trial, but it's literally just a lot of people sat in a very big room. That's not a particularly attractive looking room either, I have to say. The set design.
Love the trials. I love the trial room.
Trial is not brilliant. And, you know, by the time you reestablish yourself back into the story, you cut again, you're back out. So I find it jars quite heavily. I
mean, also the other problem you then get, because Mysterious Planet is in the past, and I get the structure of past, present, future, lovely. Every time the story ends with someone about to kill the Doctor, he's in the trial room. He has not died in this situation. He's going to be all right. Your peril has gone. It's a historical story. He's looking at it. He's done it. He's survived it. So that sort of undermines a lot of the sort of jeopardy I feel during the sort of first four.
And it's weird when they have a cliffhanger which is in the courtroom, because you're like, well, we're watching a story, and then there's a cliffhanger that's actually in the courtroom, and you're just like, well, hang on a second, you know what? Like you say, there's no sense of danger, if you like, because you know that he's going to survive because he's going to be on the trial. That being said, there's some things going on here. So you've got the idea that Ravelox is Earth, and it's been pulled, so spoilers, is Earth, and it's been pulled out of its usual place. There's a subplot around these Matrix secrets, so oh yeah. Cut to the courtroom. What was that?
Oh, we'll explain later, or maybe we'll forget about it and bring it back in 8 weeks' time.
I know we talked about, when we talked about the key to time, we were sort of like, you've got the opening and then you've got the ending, and then in between nothing really happens with the Guardians. This has got the other issue. It's completely the opposite, in there's too much courtroom and not enough story. It's kind of like we are reminded every 5 minutes that there is something going on, in the trial room or not trial room. So that, like you say, is jarring. What do we think of Joan Sims' portrayal in this as Katrika?
I think, again, this can go on the tick box. There are not enough people that do Katrika cosplay. What's wrong with them? You can double up the wig and do Kate O'Mara as Bonnie Langford. I mean, it's multifunctional. What's wrong with people?
I want a Katrika wig.
Oh yes,
I think that should be your cosplay, Jason.
I could do that. I could carry it off, I think
you could. And the boots. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's sort of, Joan is an amazing actor. I think Joan is vastly underrated in what she does and what she did. She was incredible. That said, I feel that maybe she was just crying out for just a bit of direction. I mean, I have got an anecdote that's a bit rude that I can't share on here because it involves swearing and stuff that involves Joan, and it's lovely. And she's great, but I feel that she could have just done with someone just saying, right, this is basically what the situation is, and this is what you need to be pitching it. I think there's an anecdote, isn't there, about doing the Crimson Horror that Mark Gatiss showed Diana Rigg, Julian Glover, and a couple of other performances, and said that this is when a Doctor Who villain's good. This is where you pitch it. I'm not necessarily saying it should always be the same thing, but I slightly feel that she'd maybe not been given the direction that she saw. I mean, she's amazing. It's Joan Sims, but
she steals the scenes. But I when I watch it, I can't decide if she's trying to portray it as a serious actress, like she's walked on set and gone, darling, I'm a serious actress. I'm going to really do, or she's just read the script and gone, I'm going to downplay it. I'm just going to. Because she is a brilliant actress, and I've seen her in so many great things where she's fantastic and she's very versatile. And I just felt in this she was underused. It just wasn't.
I'll clean the anecdote up. I mean, basically, we were told by an actor in the show that one of the things she asked the director was how to hold the gun. And he said, oh, however you want to hold the gun. And she said, darling, I'm the one who's going to look like a, if I do it wrong. So maybe she wanted the direction and it just wasn't forthcoming. I mean, it's slightly incredible to be that Nick Mallet, because we've just done season 26 on here.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same director. You can't think that people running around the trees and all that's the stuff we've just had is the same director. It's like you wouldn't think it.
It's a completely different feel. I mean, there is a story that says that actually Joan didn't enjoy her stint on the show, and I think that maybe comes across just a little bit. But I love her, and I think it was great to have her included in the story. Again, I talked about this in season 26 about what I called back then was stunt casting. And I think this was another one that worked really, really well. I'm with you, James. She was underused in the story, and I don't think the direction does anything for her.
I would also say, whilst we're talking about Joan Sims, that if you do want to hear more about Joan Sims, I'd say Phantom have done a cracking biography.
I'm gonna pose a quick question because I think it's hotly debated here. We're talking about this season as 4 separate stories for the purposes of this video. There are people that consider this to be one story. Where do you sit on this?
I mean, it is one story. I mean, if you're talking proper canon, it's credited as one story. It's credited as one story, individual parts, and I suppose in some ways you could almost do Daleks and Masterplan. You could chop it into segments, couldn't you, and give them individual titles. I think it's just, I suppose, that the production itself is in 3 blocks, isn't it? 3 blocks and 1 block halved, and it is 4 stories, but it's an arcing. So I suppose it's what you'd have a story arc now, and you'd be the arcing theme, and you'd have individual titles, which would probably be more palatable to an audience. Because again, this is the season, isn't it? The time where you'd have the previously on Doctor Who. Yeah. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Still, this happened and this happened. And now back to part 17 of A Trial of a Time Lord. I'll put the A-team on. It's fine. It's quicker. I want to go on to the positive. Sorry, I sort of slightly stole away there. I want to go on to the positive. The title music. Love the new title music. I think that's great. And it's nice to have title music for Colin. The opening sequence, I mean, it might have taken all the money in the world and made everything else cheap, but the trial where it grabs the TARDIS and the slow motion, it's incredible. I mean, Doctor Who hasn't got another, even past, present, and that is the best visual effect sequence, I think, that it's done.
The single most expensive effect in classic Doctor Who history.
Really?
Yes, it was, actually. Yeah. And very well done.
It's a solid fact, that is, Jason.
It's a fact.
Colin, I mean, obviously there's been a break, hasn't there? And they've had to think about let's have the Doctor and Perry get along a bit more, so that they aren't just going, oh, what do you want now, love? Shut up. So it's lighter like that, and there's some lovely little touches. I think Colin's very sort of comfortable in it, and I think he comes over really well. I mean, we can't sort of avoid, actually, with Mysterious Planet, which we have avoided, is the fact that it is the Crotons remixed, isn't it?
It's essentially the same story, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got the high brains taken into the robot, and the robots, it's kind of robots trying to do something that could blow up the planet. And I mean, bless him. I mean, he wasn't too well, was he, by this point, Rob Holmes? So I guess churning out a Doctor Who script was probably not top priority for him. And there is nothing wrong with rehashing, but do we think it was worth rehashing the Crotons? Should he have tried the Space Pirates instead?
It might have worked. You're right. He wasn't well at the time. The script is certainly lacking something. I think Colin shines throughout this season. He's working with some very tricky material at times, and I think he comes across really well. He's very confident in the role by this stage, and I do think that he deserved another couple of seasons. We all know the story, it's well documented, but you know, it wasn't right that he left at the end of this season. He was woefully treated, in all fairness, as an actor in the role, and I don't think he was ever really given a great opportunity to shine, but he brought his character to the fore in this series, particularly in this season.
I think it's worth noting that although we've expressed our opinions on the court scenes, Linda Bellingham, I think, is fantastic in her role, and you've got Michael Jason as well. I think the dynamic between those characters is good. It's just the way that it cuts into the story you're watching, and as you said, Paul, at points they're sort of debating the story that you're watching, saying, well, why is that relevant, or this is boring, or, you know, can we get to the point? And as the audience, you're sat there going, well, yeah, what is the point? You know, why are we watching this if it's not relevant?
It's the difficulty of directing courtroom scenes like that as well, because both Linda and Michael, I think, gave great performances in this, but it's very static in the way that it's shot, and there's very little for them to grip onto to put dramatic into it to a degree.
Yeah, but I adore both of them, actually. They both do I mean, lesser actors in that situation, I think it could have fallen quite considerably. I think, especially, I mean, we'll come to later on in the trial. I think there are certain parts that Michael's given that it's like, crikey, on a bike, if he wasn't so good, that would be embarrassing now. Yeah. And I think he catches that ball, and I think he saves it a lot later on. It is a shame, I think, because Linda sort of has to sit and disapprove for 14 weeks. She doesn't really get much else, and again, she's great, and when she's on, you watch her and you're with her, and she's incredible. It's an amazing performance. But it's thankless. It is incredibly thankless. Isn't there I think there's an extra where she goes on Wogan and sort of goes, oh, it's a terrible part, but I had great fun doing it for 14 weeks. I think it's something like that. And it's sort of true. And it's a shame, because you can tell, I think you can tell Colin as well is up because Linda and Michael are both, you know, I think he's up there with them. And I think that's a good thing. Just a slight shame that it is that thing of, we've had 4 minutes of the story and then stop. What's this trying to tell us now? Oh, right. Yeah. Back
Why
to
are you
the
showing
story. Yeah. Do I think I might have kept rambling, but do you guys like the new theme tune, or is it not a favorite of yours, the new arrangement?
It's not a favorite of mine. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just not one of my favorites.
I'm quite glad it was only used for one season.
Ooh.
You miserable old Marys. I love that.
I mean, no, Dominic Glynn, it's great. I mean, he wrote some great stuff for this, and it's good, but it's not as good as previous themes.
I think the funny thing that sticks in my mind with it is that the first time I watched this was Christmas Day '93. Not all of it. I hasten to add, not all of it. I mean, I think it was literally
Christmas. 14 episodes.
That was it. Sod the turkey. I want to know what happens. It was so, because it came in the tin, the TARDIS 10 on VHS. Yeah. It was all very exciting. Wow. And then the first theme tune, I wasn't expecting that, and I was like, oh my god, there's a different theme tune. And then Nicola's hair. I think that was the most incredible thing, because I didn't realize it went big, and because I'm a professional, and obviously I always ask the pertinent questions in any situation. I remember actually saying to Nicola, was it a perm? And she says no, it was not a perm. Her hair is naturally curly when it gets to a certain length. So whether anyone else worries about that, that's the story on Nicola's curly hair.
I also want to know why the trial was being held on a space station and not actually on Gallifrey.
It's an independent inquiry into his misconduct, Jason. Please get your terminology right here.
Either that, or JNT could get a better effect with a space station with his special effects rather than the planet.
I don't know whether the independent thing implies that it's been requested by the Time Lords, but not for the Time Lords, or so. I don't. it sort of varies, I think, depending on which writer's doing that block as to what the setup sort of is. But come on, it's a lovely spaceship.
It is that shot is brilliant at the beginning.
I mean, it's very Red Dwarf, isn't it, when you sort of look at it a little bit?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think
we can't not talk about the great double act of Glitz and Dibber as well. I mean, they were fabulous on screen together, weren't they?
Yeah, could have been French and Saunders.
It could have been. You're right, actually.
Yeah, you said about that last time. That would have been very odd. I'm not sure it would have added.
No. Again, as Phantom events are friends to the stars, Glenn Murphy told us that even to this day, Ray Winston still takes the piss out of him because he was recast as Bonnie Langford for the end of Trial of a Time Lord. He's like, Bonnie Langford took over from you in Doctor Who, mate. She sort of does, doesn't she? Because he thinks it's Dibber later on, and it's not. So that's nice that that's permeated into their social interactions. The thought of Ray Winston watching a Trial of a Time was incredible, isn't it? I mean, who knows what he thought of it all? So I think, have we peaked on the mysterious planet here?
I believe so.
So who is going to score first? Go on, Jason. Do your worst.
No, do you know what? I'm going to give way to James first on this one. James, you score first on this one.
Well, I don't know why you're going with me first. Is this just to see where I set the benchmark?
I just need to know whether I'm on the right tack or not, because obviously we don't share our scores before we film these, so we're not quite sure where anyone is, and I need to know where you are first before I give my first score.
Okay, well, I gave Mysterious Planet 1 bonus point for Dibber, which took it to the astonishingly high score of 5.
Okay. I think that's well worth a bonus point there. And I give it a little bonus point because I did like the opening. The first 15 seconds of the story is brilliant. James, I'm glad you went first because I'm also going to score this 5.
You were waiting to see who was going to be the bad cop this time, weren't you? To see who was going to...
You're quite right, yes. And it's now...
He's a popularity queen.
Now I've still not recovered from the score that you gave in the season 26 one now, but I'm sure you'll redeem yourself in this season.
Yeah. Well, my score for the Mysterious Planet is... Oh, it's been redacted. What's happening?
We're going to have to wait till part 14 to find out.
Wait till the end of the season, if you can remember what you were talking about. No, it's just not great. It's not the worst thing I've ever put on the television. And I'm sort of at pains to say now, I'm rating 1 to 10 on a Doctor Who scale. If something were a 1 on the Doctor Who scale, that's still probably like a 10 compared to something that might, go elsewhere on television. So don't hate me and think that I'm saying it's the worst thing that ever happened in the world. That said, it's a 4. It's not average. It's just not good. And it feels like it's a 2-parter that has had a bit of trial slapped in it, and nobody wants to be taking part. So that said, I wouldn't necessarily indicate that that's my lowest score, but Mysterious Planet is getting a 4 from me, which gives it a 14, which is quite good. 14 episodes.
That's a good start. I mean, we're scoring this based on this season, aren't we? That's how we approach our scores in each of these season reviews that we've done. So I think we're scoring as a benchmark for this season only.
Well, I wouldn't give Mysterious Planet the score I'd give Attack of the Cybermen, because they're different stories.
Of course they are. I'm just trying to pave the way for some of my other scores that are coming up in the next hour.
We move, or do we crawl on to the second story of the Trial of a Time Lord, which is Mind Warp. That's a tragedy, but Mind Warp. What do we think of Mind Warp? Let's go to James.
Oh, I wish you hadn't. Um, well, we were just talking about stunt casting, and I know we've talked about some of the sort of guest cast for some of the stories that we've reviewed so far. And here you have a great example of a great casting of Brian Blessed that really, for me, does not sit well with the story, and it's just basically him shouting a lot, which I know that's what he's famous for, you know, but you might as well call this one Perry's Alive, because it's just kind of like, what I this whole, putting aside for a moment the court scenes again, this story for me is a bit like a car crash. I've watched it so many times and I just go, why, you know, what is this? And I really don't like it. And I say that with a very sad, sort of heavy heart, because I love Doctor Who in all its different forms, but this story I really struggle with. Even the beginning where they land in the TARDIS and then you go immediately to the court scene going, well, why are we watching this? You know, why are we watching them arrive at the planet? And at that point, I'm like, well, why am I watching this story? Because I just don't, it's like, it's the TARDIS dematerialization part. That's part of the story. And, you know, suddenly you're like hearing, well, that's boring. Let's move on. You know, actually, let's watch them explore a cave.
Isn't that one of the thrills on the extra set of seeing the TARDIS arrive on Ravelok's Mysterious Planet? It's like, there's a landing scene and it's raining. That's why they've got a brolly. It's great. The pink sky is nice though.
Yes, yeah. It's a nice effect. It works really well. I'm with you, James. It's a story that offers very little hope, I think.
In life, or
well, no, it's just, you know, normally in a Doctor Who story, you get the feeling as the adventure goes on that there's a way out of this and there's going to be a good ending to it. And at no point do I ever feel that throughout the whole of the story as it progresses. It just feels it just gets progressively less hopeful as it goes through, not more hopeful, which is what a good Doctor Who story should do for me.
I guess the problem, and I know Colin's been quite vocal on this in a lot of interviews, is not really knowing how much of it's happened, how much of it didn't happen, how much of it happened but didn't happen the way they're showing it. So basically the story did happen but didn't happen, or happened a little bit the way it's, and within those 4 episodes there is nothing wrong with doing that as your narrator, saying actually Van Liel's twisted this, he didn't really do that and he didn't really do that, but because you don't get any clue as a viewer as to what is actually real and not real and the consequences of it, it becomes this awful bitty unwatchable thing. It's like a choose your own adventure book with the pages torn out. It doesn't glue.
And the fact that they take the Doctor out, you know, the Time Lords actually take the Doctor out of the story towards the end, so you don't get a resolution to the story. You know, normally the Doctor's the one that at the last minute saves everyone, but he's removed from the story, leaving Perry to, you know, to her fate. You have this whole idea that the Doctor has undergone some sort of mental transformation, so his character changes for half the story because of what happened when he got attached to the machine. But then in the trial scene, you've got him going, oh, I think that was just a clever ploy to try and, you know, and then you've got that really awkward scene where he's with Perry trying to torture her to give him information. And he goes, oh, you know, it's all an act. And, you know, but then I'm going to kill you if you don't tell me. And for me, it just is awful. It loses its way so badly. And then the bits in the courtroom, I actually in this story prefer the bits in the courtroom to the story, because at least in the courtroom I know pretty much what's going on, whereas in this story I'm just like, oh it's
oh no, he's got his yeast extract.
All I'm doing here is just a little visual prop. Thank you.
I'd rather have the Marmite. It just, and it just descends into chaos in the end, and I find it really difficult to sit through.
I wonder how much of Philip Martin's script was tinkered with to get the trial bits in, and whether or not when he wrote the script, he wrote it knowing that the trial was going to be sitting alongside it.
No, it is purposefully trial led. It is. But then, yeah, Colin does the thing. If he asks Philip, is that, and he's like, and Eric didn't know, and it's kind of like, oh crikey, if no one's steering this ship, what are you doing? And also, I suppose, having said in the previous story that it was lovely to see the Doctor and Perry getting along, having moved on from the sort of, you've then got him chaining her to a rock and threatening to kill her. So it's kind of, oh man, we've gone so many steps forward with just having the Doctor and the companion getting along, to now he's trying to do horrible things to her, but he probably isn't doing horrible things to her because it's the Matrix lying. But we won't discover that till later on in the story, if that's true. If we do indeed find out whether anything in this is true, it feels like it's a sort of big setup for, if this is being distorted and this is all made up, then we'll see the truth of it later, and we don't. There isn't a payoff. I mean, obviously we get Nicola's pink heart flashback thing.
But that was added in the last cut, wasn't it? Originally, this was going to be her, and it's a really horrible ending for Perry. Whether either way, either what happens in this episode or what happens subsequently later on, the idea that she's suddenly going to just look at Brian Blessed's angry face and go, "I love you," and run off. I find that really just, I almost wish for her this was the end at this point. She'd finish, because it was kind of just like, oh well, let's give her a little bit of a reprieve, but it doesn't really give her an overall decent send-off. I
mean, the deaths of because I mean, she doesn't get killed; she gets erased. It's horrible.
Yeah,
it's nasty. She's she's erased from existence rather than just being killed. And I think one of the chilling sort of touches is you have that little pause after she's been. I mean, she doesn't get killed by that essentially. I mean, then Brian Blessed comes in and goes a bit Terminator on it all. It's the pause before Colin does, you kill Perry, and it's kind of like, crikey, it's a real, there's a real reaction there. And that I mean, given the 4 episodes of the story you've had to endure before, is incredibly emotional, and it's a great scene. It's probably, it might be the defining sort of 6th Doctor thing, and that is a great moment. But I suppose, obviously it's turned out later that she isn't so dead, and she has hooked up with King Yukanos for some godforsaken reason of which we don't understand. But I suppose as a child viewing it, I suppose Tam said they'd killed Adric, so maybe it wasn't that bad if they'd have just left it as a dramatic exit.
I think that's how they should have left it. I think adding the bit in at the end was, I think, probably a little bit of panic that they felt they may have gone too far, but I think it should have stood as the ending. They were brave enough to write it as such and present it as such, and they should have left it as such, in my opinion. However hard an ending that might have been, because in all fairness, I think Nicola's on record herself saying actually she wished that had not been the ending, where they gave her the quick purple heart-shaped sort of visual on the Matrix screen right at the very end. But again, come back to it, how much of this is real and how much of it wasn't inside the Matrix, because we just still don't know.
I mean, she could have stepped out of that into the pink goo, spotted him across the beach, and oh my God, who is that fit wrestling warrior king? I want me a piece of that ass. We don't know, because the Valiard thought, I can't show the Inquisitor that. He'll think she's going to be having a happy ending here. Whereas I want the skull cap and body white thing.
What did you guys think about the return of Syl in this story?
I think the character works fine in the story. I think the whole idea that if the transplant doesn't work, he's going to be killed. He's quite a sort of underhanded character anyway. You've seen him before, so I think that works perfectly. I like the points where he's with Colin, and they're sort of doing the future predicting future events and stock markets and stuff, and and he's so gleeful that the Doctor's giving him useful information to speculate with. They work fine. In the context of this story, it's a good match.
Chris Ryan as well, also great performance from him, I think, because same in the bill. It's sometimes if you are in one of those costumes, you're fighting against the costume to give a performance, and you don't feel that. I think they're very real characters, and that's kudos to both of them. Patrick Reichardt, I love. That's a very understated performance, but it is great. He has a lot of very dry sort of performance, I think.
There's some comedy moments in there, when Chris Ryan's character wakes up and sees Syl just like this and almost dies as a result of it. There are some lighter moments, but unfortunately it doesn't really make up for the mess of everything else. And as I mentioned on the last story we just spoken about, the Time Lords, again, the Time Lords are directly interfering in this. They take the Doctor out and then they sort of freeze everything so that Kranos can go in and kill everyone. So it's a bit, there's this sort of thread underneath of the Time Lords have done something, have got involved, which I find is quite interesting in a way, but subsequent stories you see something else.
The difficult thing, I think we sort of touched on this for the last season, is that if you have this story thread where it's going to run 14 weeks, you've got to have some points where the audience, if they're only tuning in that week, whatever, they're okay with it. And if you are following the whole thing, you get rewarded for it. And I think the sort of problem is that there isn't, because Eric obviously leaves and the John Nathan does a bit of scribbling. There isn't anyone in control of this and all the way through to say, we just need this in the first part, this in the second, this in the third, and it'll all be resolved this way in the last two. It does feel like there's lots of bits that are great ideas and they're lovely sort of notions, but nobody thought, how is this all going to be combined and sort of resolved?
Bearing in mind that at this point, Doctor Who's future was not very secure, it just seems like really bad time for the show to start falling apart behind the scenes. Because you're right, if they managed to stick to consistent stories during this season, maybe it wouldn't have ended the way it did for Colin. But Colin was basically gone by the end of the season, before we even got to the end of the season. And it's just rather sad that I think this was, for me, one of the sort of low points in my Doctor Who viewing, even though Colin's great, he's much more confident as the Doctor, but for me this story just falls apart on so many levels. Even within the context of the trial, the background story, the mind warp story, just doesn't work.
The interesting thing, I think, just on the sort of notion of it coming back after the cancellation, is that near the end, after War Games, there was that moment, do we get rid of Doctor Who? And then it sort of came back and Spear, and there was that moment sort of post Inferno where there's like, are we going to, and it sort of only accidentally sort of came back in those contexts by not being able to find something to take its slot. But if you look at the season 8 as Barry's I've got to relaunch Doctor Who or it's gone scenario, the attack and the variety and the energy that comes with those stories, which you have that opening sequence obviously with the spaceship that looks incredible, and someone's obviously thought we've got to come bam, but then you go bam and the two stories aren't bam, and you kind of think, actually you've saddled yourself with a very meta thing of we're on trial, we if you'd have just had that idea over lunch, jettisoned it and gone, let's just get 4 bloody great stories here that say bam bam bam, Doctor Who's back and it's good. But it sort of comes down to, I suppose, the producer, script editors not necessarily wanting to be doing it, maybe.
It's interesting actually, because when this first aired, I was 16, and this is probably the only season of Doctor Who that I didn't watch right the way through to the end. And it was during this story that I walked away from this season originally and didn't come back to it, because I just didn't feel that this was where I thought I wanted the series to be back then. We all look at things in different ways, and retrospectively looking back, I mean, it's been very interesting to go back and rewatch these. These are not go-tos that I would normally watch. This is not Sunday afternoon, or let's put Mind Warp on. But it's interesting, having gone back to rewatch them for this, is that you retrospectively look back at them in a different way. But yeah, this was the first Doctor Who season I didn't watch from start to finish.
I wasn't born when this was shown, so I had the luxury.
I also saw you counting on your fingers while I was giving my age away there as well.
Any other points we want to raise on the mind warp? I'm seeing blank faces. I think there has been much mind wiping here. So having deferred last time, come on, Jason, let's have your score.
I will indeed go first on this one. Yes.
The story that destroyed your love of Doctor Who in 1986.
I came back to the series quite the following year, by the way. I didn't well, when it came back, I didn't finish forever on it. No, this isn't a good one. It's a bit of a mess. I think Syl and Kiv are swallowed up in the middle of a pretty difficult story. It loses its way quite quickly. The trial bits, as James has said, I think rescue it a little bit, but and there's some good performances in there from the regulars, and I think you're right with Patrick Wycart's performance was good. I'm going to give this score. I can't give it any higher, I'm afraid. It's 4.
It's 4 episodes. It's 4 points, Jason. It's your traditional formula.
No, I didn't do that formula this time. And I'm beginning to regret the score I gave to the Power of Kroll in our season 16 special, because it's given me very little room to go in any of these scores. But no, this isn't 4 points. This isn't a point an episode. This is just a 4, because it's 4.
Okay, James, where are you at on Doctor Who and the Mind Warp?
Oh, stand by your beds. It's a 2.5 from me.
That's the lowest score we've given on any story.
I really struggle to watch this story, and every so often I do a season where I just watch it back to back, and this will be the season where for those 4 episodes I'll go and do the washing up, or I will hoover the house, or do some laundry. I'll have it on because I don't agree with skipping an episode that you don't particularly like, but these 4, I'd rather just see the courtroom scenes and not the actual story. Just so I know, I'm going to get a lot of hate. Please feel free, use the comments box underneath. But
absolutely. Use the comments boxes, because that's what they're there for.
I really struggle with this.
I think there could be a special edition for you here of just the court scenes, and that could be Mind Warp for you.
Could be.
I think I'm with James on this. To be honest, the positives I'd say is Nicola's exit is incredibly brutal. I love the scenes around it. I love Patrick Rycott. I get, if you book Brian Blessed, you get Brian Blessed, and that's what you're doing. I mean, he can do stuff like that. Wasn't what he was there for. I suspect he sort of looked around him and thought, no, I'm going for this. Dressed as a samurai, there's a lot wrong with it. I don't understand it doesn't make a lot of sense. None of it pieces together well. The stuff that you do see, to me, is a little bit dreary. I mean, it's dreary. I don't like Mind Warp. I'm very much the same. I find if I want to watch Trial of Time, would I come into it with the first story, and I think it's okay, and then you get to Mind Warp and you go out in the garden for an hour and a half and hope that it finishes. So I'm not even going to be as generous as James with that extra fraction. I'm going to give Mind Warp 2.
Ooh.
Okay.
Was that the pause? Was that like a pause in tribute to You Just Killed Perry? Was that what the pause was?
No more can you ever have a go at me about the power of Kroll.
I'm just thinking if later on we're going to do sort of a flashback sequence of all of us in sort of like rose colour going, well, actually, I gave it a 6.
You got to score what you got to score. And amazingly, Mind Warp finishes with 8.5. Well, on that bombshell, we've got a little word from our sponsors.
Phantom is back.
It's about time too.
Our monthly Chiswick signing events will return on the 24th of April.
You can meet the stars of Doctor Who in a COVID-secure environment.
In line with government guidelines.
We're back with our socially distant photo studio, with your safety put first every step of the way.
Sharpies at the ready.
Utopia this year will be on the weekend of the 9th to the 11th of July.
And we'll make a welcome return to Bristol later this year, when Pandorica will take place on the weekend of the 12th to 14th of November.
And for more information, visit our website www.phantomevents.co.uk.
See you there.
Hope you enjoyed that. We are back in the courtroom, sagacity. We've had a pause to take that all in. See what I did here? And we're now on to Terror of the Vervoids. For clarity, much like it's like an episode of Tenable, for clarity, we're calling it Terror of the Vervoids, even though it was recorded as The Ultimate Foe, because The Ultimate Foe is what people call the next one. It's all down to the target novel and exciting things like that. So, a new story. James, do you want to kick us off on a Vervoid?
Yes, go on then. So, having sat through the last story, I'm pleased to say that this is immeasurably better. And for me, what the last story should have been like, it's a Doctor Who story. It's got a lot of intrigue. There's lots of plots going on. Quite a big cast. A hell of a lot of garden chairs on the on the ship for no apparent reason. I think you've got great casting in this one. You've got Honor Blackman, who's really, really good. Lots of good supporting cast. And I, when I rewatched this in the last week, I did watch the broadcasted version. But what I love on the Blu-ray is that they've got this story without the courtroom scenes, and I can see why, because it works. It works as a Doctor Who story without the courtroom scenes. That being said, in this story in particular, I don't mind the courtroom scenes so much. They are, by this point, just getting repetitive. It's just a lot of stack yard, rail yard, knackers yard, all of those things. Linda Bellingham just going, gentlemen, behave yourselves, kind of thing. But I love the beginning bit where you see Colin, you see the Doctor really sad over what's happened to Perry in the previous story. It's a really, really good piece of acting from him in that very beginning bit where he's like, well, I'm going to carry on, but I feel really upset that Perry's, died effectively in the last story. I think the Vervoids are very well thought out. And there's so many interlacing storylines. So you've got sort of Rudge, who's, it's his last voyage. He's planning to make some money out of it. You've got Lasky and the scientists and what's going on there. You've got the investigator. You've got the introduction of Mel. There's just, I'm sorry, I'm taking everything from everyone.
I mean, there's nothing left.
I'm just happy I've got something positive to say about a story in this.
And I agree with you. It's a complete step change up from the previous story. I think there's a brilliant energy brought in with Bonnie the minute she arrives. It just feels like a different program. Colin's on top form. You know, you've got a classic whodunit in space, which is, I think, always a great premise for a Doctor Who story. Even though the reception area of the Hyperion 3 looks a little bit like the reception at the Crossroads Motel. But I mean,
they have the keys, don't they? They have literally like Yale keys on
Exactly.
giant key rings in the future.
And it's like the motel. It's like the motel rooms. You only ever saw 2 rooms in Crossroads, and it was always number 8 and number 9, and there was always a key for it. And you know, it's just brilliant. It's brilliant from that perspective. You've got carrot juice, which is always good, and I haven't got any carrot juice with me, by the way. Pull out a quick carrot juice there, but
you've got a Vervoid.
Got great supporting cast. For me, big step up over last story.
It's interesting because multiple cheerful points to make about this story. I think Pip and Jane have always had this really bad reputation that people have always sort of gone, oh, they're a bit hacky. They just, but Christ on a Bike, they do. Very sort of solid, very reliable. I think family shows, I guess, is a terribly patronizing way of putting it, but it is a solid story. It is what you need for 4 episodes. It's got the beginning, the middle, the end. It's got the characters. It's got the threads. It's sort of like the complete antithesis of the other 2, because it's like this is what it needs. It feels like they've gone, do you know what, the trial thing probably is dragging this. Less trial, you know, more story. I mean, the fact, like you said, that you can have an edit where you take the trial sequences out and it still makes sense and it works is what the other 2 should have had, essentially. So we're now in the future. So this is obviously now we've had the past, present, and onto the future. So the future's looking bright, allegedly. It's very odd twist, I suppose, in terms of having a trial, is that he's historically on trial for things he has done, meddled in, and his defense is say, do you know what, yeah, probably I am guilty, but I won't be guilty again if you set me free, which is a bit dubious, especially given that the end of it then is like the impartial inquiry of a Time Lord becomes the, you've committed genocide in the future that you haven't done yet, so you're going to be found guilty of genocide even though you haven't done it yet. So maybe we should set you free now and then come back for you in the future when you have done the crime.
But it is, but I think the value I'd said is your argument that things are going to improve. And I sat there going, well, actually, yes, because this story is much better than the previous one. So that I find a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It probably wasn't meant like that. But I just think that if they put this story first, it would have been so, you know, much stronger start to it. And if you took the trial sequences out of Mind Warp, what would you be left with?
A headache. A bad headache. Yeah. Why isn't there a fan edit of this, of the trial sequences from Terror of the Vervoids with Remembrance of the Daleks, where he commits genocide on the Daleks? Why hasn't someone done the little cut there? So he goes, we're going to take a trip into the future with a different incarnation and a different companion. This is what I do. I mean, it's studio bound. I mean, I don't know whether anyone gets upset by the lack of location.
No, I don't think this one needs it. I think it's a good enough story, stands on its own 2 feet, and I think the futuristic view of it means that I think, you know, studio or not, I think it works well.
Honor Blackman pitching it incredibly, I think. Only a very, very assured actress could use the line, well, if you've quite finished with my tracksuit. I mean, incredible scenes there with Honor and Bonnie. I mean, the Lady with the Dragon's Voice. What else to say about Doctor Who and the Terror of the Vervoids? I mean, why isn't Janet the killer? That's the thing that worries me to this day. She's in on everything. She makes great coffee, but she is in on everything. Why? She must have killed someone. It's not on screen, but she must have done something.
She was obviously going back to finish off the old bloke when he was in the shower, you know. Just,
hang on. Can we clarify? She's going to go and finish off the old bloke.
Kill him, I meant.
Okay, it's a family show. It's a family show. We don't want to know what Janet was offering. Although, interestingly, she's flirting with Edward, and then at the end, when she's in the lounge, there's another guy puts his arm around her. So I think she was an affectionate lass. She was the Jason of the Hyperion 3. That's what she was.
Hello. I thought we said this was a family show.
Well, I don't know what your coffee's like.
My coffee's excellent as well, you know it.
And the other big peril, I mean, it's a double peril here. Now, I love the episode 1 cliffhanger. I love the Bonnie scream into the title music. That's incredible. Right, so 2 points to make here that I don't quite understand. Edward says to her, I don't want you breaking your neck, at least not until... When's going to be a good time for Mel to break her neck? I mean, as chat-up lines go, that's ropey. And second point on that is why does the hydroponic center then blow up? I feel like I've killed nobody's. I mean, I know you didn't write it, but and I worried that I was making a horrendous sort of thing. But it blows up. Which, if it's a security device, it seems odd that your security system would blow up what you were securing.
I'm not looking that closely at it.
Unless it wasn't designed for human hand to touch it, was it? It was to keep the vervoids in rather than to let anyone.
But they were transporting them to Earth, weren't they? So they did want to get them out at some point. Who knows? Who knows? We'll forgive that because it's a lovely bit of pyrotechnic and scream. We don't mind that.
It's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And like you say, I love the scream going into the titles. That's very good. I like we talked about Mel on our last review when we were looking at we were talking about season 26. And I think here Mel's a really strong character. She's not the screamer that sadly she sort of devolved into, although we just talked about her screaming at the end of the episode. She's quite plucky. She's like, well, I'm going to go and investigate even if you don't, and she's getting messages through her headphones and off investigating things. She's quite a formidable character, and I like that because it's the first time we've seen her, so we don't really know her backstory. Her first scene is she's bossing the Doctor into doing exercise, that in the TARDIS console room. So I like that. I think she adds a lot to the story. She, in a way, sort of Colin steps back and is quite kind of like, there's something going on, but I'm not going to really act yet. And she goes off and does that and does the investigating. So I like that. There's a lot of death in this episode. You've got this sort of the vervoid human compost heap, which you see at the end, but the characters are pretty much either killed off by what's his name? Dolland, is it?
Yeah.
So either he kills them off to try and keep the secret of what's going on with the vervoids, or the vervoids themselves are killing people off. So there's a lot of death in it. Genuinely scary sequence where the Ruth, the assistant, is first revealed with the half vervoid face. That's quite. I remember watching that scene and being quite sort of freaked by that. But then that's Doctor Who. Doctor Who does scare you, does provide moments of light and dark, and this is where I feel this episode's so much better than the subsequent one, because there is that mix, and it makes more sense. It makes sense in the context of it. So yeah.
And also another cast member we've not met, Michael Craig. I mean, Michael Craig, incredible sort of film actor, pitching it completely right as well. And it's nice as well when you get these characters. I mean, obviously it creates 100 box sets, but the notion that it's someone the Doctor's met before and knows, and there's a sort of, you don't have to go through that kind of rigmarole of, I'm here and I'm going to help you, and I'm this person. He's like, yeah, I know what you're at, and we had an adventure previously, and it's great to just actually you move on then quite quickly. You don't have to do the put him in prison for 2 episodes whilst we work out whether he's good or bad, or and it's a lovely. He's a great actor, and Honor and Michael, I think, is the pitching there, and Malcolm Tierney, and there's a lot of great performances in there. It's sad that Simon Slater, star of the Spice Girls musical, is dispatched so soon. Although he does get paid to be on the compost heap. He was quite impressed that he got paid for having Honor Blackman lay on top of him. It is quite grim. I mean, when you think about, things that you probably would think twice about showing on screen, I suppose plant-based killers piling up human bodies to make compost, you think twice.
But it felt quite right in the story. It didn't feel forced. The whole thing was, I think, just again, because I think the pace of the story and the whole whodunit thing, I kind of like in a good murder mystery, I sort of want to see the odd body or two, don't you?
You do. Honor Blackman's holding Murder on the Orient Express she's reading it when you first see her in the lounger. I think you do. I think there is a point to that, though. I think I was thinking back to the Dalek story, where there's the pile of bodies at the end of Resurrection of the Daleks, and it's just quite grim and it feels unnecessary. Here, it's what the Vervoids do. It's in a way, it's part of their makeup. That's what they're driven to do. But it does provide that. I know back in the trial, things escalate, but it is a genuine sort of concern that they might get to Earth and they might overrun Earth. So this is the point to stop them. And I think so, in that context of everything, it works very well.
The decomposition scene at the end with the Vervoids as well works really well. I think it's a great effect. Yeah,
it's great. And also, I know some people do deride the costumes of the Vervoids for various reasons. But I always remember seeing them in the different exhibitions like Gogh and stuff like that. And actually, they looked incredible up close. I love the design. I think it's great. I mean, it's very difficult to do that kind of plant person. I suppose you use Caesar Doom, you get the repainted axe on, don't you, to sort of do the plant man. And it's great. And it's nice to have a monster as well. There is something kind of traditional about the story that it's got this kind of makeup where it's like, we've got a monster, we've got a villain, we've got a story that starts here and ends here, and that's sort of why this probably stands out now as one of the personally for me as one of the high points in the season.
I quit this season too early when I was 16. I should have stopped and watched this story because it's good enough to have got me back and interested.
I mean, also, historically looking at some of the horrors like DWB and stuff like that at the time, there was a lot of hate going on for whatever was done, and I know Bonnie got a lot of vitriol about because it was Bonnie Langford at the time. And I think now, 30 years on, people don't have that kind of prejudgment on it. It's Mel and it's played by Bonnie. It's not, I grew up watching, Just William, and it's, I think people don't have that now. I mean, the fact that she's newcomer for EastEnders is incredible, but you watch that now, and I don't think you have the baggage that some of the audience perhaps did going into this. I think that's probably why we feel that it's a fresh, great sort of take on things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Are we headed to a score on the Hyperion 3?
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay. Should we go to James first on this one?
I genuinely like this story, and I was very happy to find an edition without the trial sequences. And if I was scoring that version, I'd give it a slightly higher score, but I'm going to give it 7.5.
7.5. Jason, are you fractional or are you solid?
No, I'm not fractioning here. It's a very good 7.
I thought I'd do the ooh because
Why? Because we always ooh after you do your scores.
Well, you don't have to ooh after my who, because it's never no. As much as I'd love to, I am giving it the exact same as James. I'm giving it a 7.5, which gives Terror of the Vervoids 22.
That's a very
A
fair score.
respectable score.
That's only half a point less than the previous two stories combined. Just putting that out there. Well, we roll now to the final
Shall we
two
stop
parts.
now? Shall we just stop now? Is that
No, we can't stop now because after 12 weeks of adventure and courtroom shenanigans, Doctor Who's impartial inquiry, which has been escalated to a genocide charge from the future, is now going to be resolved. Is it?
Well, it is. Yes. There's a great line that comes out of these one of these last two episodes, and the line is, "The only logic is there is no logic." And I think that sums the last two episodes of this season up.
James, you've not liked any of the trial sequences thus far? We've now got basically two episodes which are sort of half trial sequence, half in the trial screen. Are you?
I think I'm glad they go back to the courtroom because that's where we started, and you're right, the charge has changed to genocide, and things that like they're getting really, really serious, and then suddenly the Master appears. Big spoiler moment there, and I really don't know what to make of it. I don't know whether that adds or detracts from everything. I think you because there is so much trial sequence in all the other episodes, you get to this point where you're just like, now I want the payoff. Now I want to understand how those stories fitted in and what's actually really happening. And there are some good moments. Don't get me wrong. There are some key moments where the Master reveals some of the things that's going on behind the scenes. Again, you get to see more from Linda and from Michael. Good performances. And then you have the bits in the Matrix, which just, again, going back to some of the comments that we've made before, now it's like I want to stay with the courtroom and I don't want the bits in the Matrix so much. I mean, apart from the bit where Colin is sort of drowning in quicksand, I think that's quite a good cliffhangery ending. The rest of it, the Mr. Popplewicks and things like that, I just think, is it trying to be too clever or is it just naff?
I mean, it's a shame. The Mr. Popplewicks scenes, Geoffrey Hughes is a fantastic actor. And
absolutely.
It just did him no justice because I think by this point, the story is just a bit of a mess now. I mean, we know, again, behind the scenes, things were coming to a head at the writing stage on this story. And, unfortunately, Robert didn't finish the script. Pip and Jane have to come back in. Eric's in the middle of it. They're trying to pull the last two episodes together. And if I'm right from what I've read, neither Pip and Jane didn't actually know what was in the previous episode particularly, so they're writing it a little bit blind. It all shows on screen. The Matrix scenes, when we talk about the Matrix scenes, if you look at something like The Deadly Assassin, that's a bit bonkers in itself, the Matrix scene, but at least there's a very good purpose for it being there. I just don't know that we needed to go diving into the Matrix in the way that we did. The Master turns up, it just gets a bit confusing. We've already got one villain there. Do we need another? I do think that, that the principals are really bringing it to the fore when we're in the court. It was lovely to see James Bree make an appearance as well. Lovely actor. And of course, obviously being the security chief back in the war game. So a nice touch to see him in the court scenes here. There isn't a lot I can say that's going to lift this story, particularly. It's just a bit of a mess, I think, how it ends up.
I think because Robert's obviously gone back to the Deadly Assassin thing of do some fantasy sequences in the Matrix. You can be a bit kind of spooky, and I mean it's quite casual. The drop that actually the Valeyard's the Doctor. It's given the size of the revelation. It's kind of like. This is your future self. No, nobody's really that aghast. There isn't a kind of shit. This is crazy. And I do think slightly it's because the Master's involvement does diffuse things. He doesn't really need to be there. There's you've got 2 episodes that essentially need to tie everything up from the last 12 and give you some kind of resolution. And an adventure, because equally, I suppose, if you're tuning into episode 13, you don't want to just have 2 episodes of, this is how this story's ended. But it's a bit rich, isn't it? Because you get Glitz back, you get the Valiard finally stands up and gets to do something. You get the Master drag Mel back. I mean, in some ways, you kind of think actually it might have been easier not to have had the Master, not to have had Mel, not to have Glitz, and kind of just focus it a bit more. The sequences look great. The Pottery Museum stuff looks wonderful. It's all beautifully shot. The Master's sort of cheapo box of treasure that always makes me laugh. That's
costume jewelry.
That is costume jewelry that they've just popped in, and I always find it hilarious that no matter what the villain, because obviously he's bad, so he's wearing black, he has to give his TARDIS a little bit of black gloss paint job. I love that. He's like, I'm a bad guy. I ain't having a white and cream one. I'm going to get this black paint on this. It's a shame because I think there's too many people sort of vying for it. There are too many sort of top people. There's not a sort of guest cast that everyone is at a sort of top pulling for it. Like Jeffrey Hughes did an incredible character performance.
Yeah,
slightly pointlessly so in some ways.
And it should have been the payoff, I think, in these 2 for Linda and and for Michael to have the limelight in these 2. They've carried the scenes through the previous 3 stories. This is the time when really they should have been brought into some sort of narrative within the storyline. I mean, obviously Michael was, and I think he played it really, really well. But I think again, Linda was a little bit underused.
And Doctor Who, a megabyte modem. I mean, they will shit the bed when they see a USB stick. I don't know what's going to happen. It all sort of comes down to just the megabyte modem with the big flashing police siren lights on it, and it's kind of like, oh man, this is what it's come to. Because I said earlier, I think Michael and Linda both massive kudos for the whole season. Michael, Colin, Linda, amazing. Michael has some of the most appalling dialogue, and having said how much I love Pip and Jane in the last one, the dialogue in the last episode, the ray phase shift and all these beautiful things that mean very little, Michael delivers them so beautifully. And if it wasn't Michael doing it, I mean, I don't know, but he delivers them with and he also has the incredible plan laugh, doesn't he, like Friends, that kind of he does that with absolute conviction. And I think that's I can't score it highly because of that, but I think hurrah for the Valiard. And it's a shame that it's not the Valiard in a story. It's not a 4-part story. This is the Valiard. The revelation is that he's a bad doctor. That would be great. This kind of muddying of that with the trial bit and the inquiry, or whatever we're calling it, it doesn't reward.
He's got a great on-screen and in real life. Whenever I've seen him seen them both at Phantom events, him and Colin have got this great camaraderie. With the way that they talk in real life is pretty much how they talk on the show. They're just sort of pointed sort of comments at each other, and I think that works really well. Like you say, unfortunately here you've got Linda Bellingham being effectively sidelined because there's so much going on around her. Even when they come back and they do the fake courtroom scene, it's not, there's not much to it. She basically sends the doctor down for his crimes. It just a real shame that there were some really good elements that could have been brought forward that didn't. And like you say, could have almost done without the Master and just had this 2-episode face-off with him and the Valiard, and and even keep the Matrix stuff. It didn't need the extra villain on top of it. It didn't add anything to it. It was, they have the keeper of the Matrix come in and go, well, you can only get in if you've got this key. And he's like, well, it can be copied, can't it? And he's like, well, no, it never leaves my sight unless someone goes into the Matrix. Oh, well, yeah. And you know, and how easily does Mel take the key from him? She just stamps on his foot and grabs it and runs off. And you're just like, well, really good security on Gallifrey.
Not being funny, you could go to Timpson's and get a key cut to get into the Matrix. It's that easy, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Which has got a very retro key, hasn't it?
It has.
Quite literally a key.
Key.
And also the Keeper of the Matrix gets that line, doesn't he, where he leans and goes, "Oh, insurrection on Gallifrey, the place is in rebellion and uproar." We won't show that, but just for anyone at home, that's what's happening back on Gallifrey. This is a whole kind of concept in itself, but it's a sort of throwaway line of like, crap. So if they've been following the trial, I think it's like a Gallifreyan Twitter where they've been like, oh, that didn't happen, #fake and all that. I mean, is that what the notion is, that the Gallifreyans have been watching the trial, the impartial inquiry, and now they're in uproar because it's been faked, and
it kind of leaves you in a really sort of weird place with Gallifrey, you know, with the Time Lords, because the Time Lords have been instrumental in several of the other stories as well, behind the scenes, motivate, you know, sort of manipulating things. And then you discover there's like a civil war on Gallifrey that's kicked off because of the trial, and none of that is shown in any way.
No, it's not even mentioned. And then you get this really bizarre piece at the end where it's the Valeyard still there. So he's now the Keeper of the Matrix. And you've got this sort of really bizarre twist of the episode ending, or the entire story ending, with the Valeyard just chuckling away there. Again, why? There's no closure to the story. The last episode reminded me so much, when I rewatched it this week, it reminded me so much of the final episode of The Prisoner. It's just completely bonkers in many respects, and there's no payoff.
And obviously it's sorted out in the Target novel, but the fact that the Doctor then leaves with Mel, who he's not met. I mean, the weird thing is, with hindsight, the ideal way of doing this would have been to have the trial outline. You could have had 4 stories about the Doctor's exploits and what he'd done and what he'd done wrong. And then he could have been made to regenerate like he did in the War Games. And then you'd have got Sylvester the next, and that would have made, I mean, they didn't know Colin was going at this point, which is why he just gets his carrot juice outro. And I understand that. But it does feel that the trial thing just isn't comprehensively thought through, and it's such a shame, because it is a great framework. I mean, the Key to Time thing was a great framework. The trial thing's a more exact framework, but perhaps it would have been, I get why they interject, but it would have been better if you'd have opened your story with the scene and then done the 4 episodes and then ended with, oh, so what were you trying to show? It feels that it didn't add all along the way. It posed more questions that weren't answered, and things which didn't make sense, and then at the end, obviously, because they just stand up and she goes, "Do you know what? All charges dropped because you know, I'm not dead. You saved my life. It's fine." And the Valeyard was obviously a wrong gun, so it doesn't matter that you're going to go on to cause genocide. It doesn't matter that you interfered. The fact that you've saved the day today means that you could be. Do you want to be president? President? Fancy that. It's kind of like, what
you've caused civil war back on Gallifrey, but that's fine. We'll let you off. You can be the
what happens now, because he knows what happens in the Vervoid story.
Yes, that's why he doesn't get involved in it. You said he's a bit passive in the story. That's because he's like, you go and investigate that, Mel. Keep an eye out on him. He's a wrong one. It's like I know what this Janet's like, though. I'm going to go straight to that checkout. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
It doesn't at all.
You'd have to imagine that he has his memory of the future removed, but then if he hasn't done it, it can't have happened, so he can't have seen it. It's
I go back to the sentence I used as we started talking about these particular 2 episodes. The only logic is there is no logic.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes slightly cruelly. There was that documentary, wasn't there, with Peter Davison, where he said the more you rehearse the story, the more it fell apart before your eyes and things didn't make enough sense. And I think to an extent, because if you do a historical story, it's a very set amount of boundaries. If you do a story set in the future on a space station with fantasy sequences, your parameters are slightly blurrier, so it's harder, I think, to have a sort of set elements of rules, I guess.
Mm.
But is it a satisfactory end to the season, do we think, overall?
I think it's an unsatisfactory end to Colin's tenure on the show, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen more of his Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I think he grew into the role much more confident in these stories. Mel was a good companion for him in this story, in the Vervoid story. It showed promise. It showed that this is, this could be saved, and then you have this almighty sort of mash-up of a 2-episode ender, which doesn't quite hit the mark for me. It feels unsatisfactory, like you say, Jason. There's the Valeyard is there as the end, as the keeper of the Matrix, and you're kind of like, well, what was the whole point of all of that?
I mean, the interesting thing is, I suppose it's the sort of eternal debate for Doctor Who fans is what would have been the 23 been better than the trial? I mean, the Nightmare Fair, Mission to Magnus, like, would that? I mean, you can never know for sure. I mean, sad that we didn't get to see him in Blackpool with a Celestial Toymaker, I guess. That's what I take from that.
Yeah.
We got to go around Blackheath Park with Joan Sims instead. Trial of Time, I mean, it is something you have to divide up, I think, as individuals. So we discussed this at the start, but I think it is very much individual elements. Do we think still?
Yeah, I think we really have to score the last 2 episodes as we would score a story. I think, even though they finish a season, I think we've got to score it in that way. But I do wonder how different the future would have been for Doctor Who had there not been quite as much politics at play in the BBC at the time, if the production behind the scenes wasn't quite so troubled in the way that it was, because clearly there was, you can see through this entire season that there's no firm hand on the tiller, it feels like, and it's a little adrift. And I wonder if it's adrift because they already knew that the writing's on the wall or whatever at that stage. I mean, there's lots of thought and speculation out there as to what it was, but it was just for the last time for it going out on a Saturday night as well. It just felt like a shame. It felt like we threw away a good opportunity here, and I do think the Unmade season did read well, but this was a wasted opportunity in some respects this season.
I think I sort of come back to the Barry Letts thought when he did his season 8 is that the more first nights you've got, the more chance you've got to catch the viewers. And I know we know that it's 4 stories, but if you were looking at the Radio Times, it said Trial of a Time Lord Part 8 of 14. You think, I've not seen the other 7. It doesn't matter how much of a still you have at the start to explain it all. There is something tight about going, it's a 4-part, it's a 3-part, it's a 4-part, which they get. They sort of get the structure right for the next season if the stories aren't quite right. And they sort of, it takes a couple of years somehow for it to get back. Because essentially they're being asked to fix something that wasn't broken. I don't think season 22 was broken. It was a political move to take it off. There isn't anything that they were doing wrong that they needed to readdress. I mean, obviously maybe soften the Doctor relation, but as a show, it wasn't damaged. No. So they've come back to repair it, but without it being broken. And it does sort of feel like they're like, what are we doing? We've lost our direction somewhere.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
So we've debated now the final 2 parts. We don't want a Ray phase shift coming in to end this, or the screen breaking. So who wants to go first with their final score on The Ultimate Foe, or Time Inc. we could call it? We won't. Go on, Jason, give us a score.
I'll apply my megabyte modem then. As I've said, I think it's an unsatisfactory end to the season. I think I've thought long and hard about this score, but unfortunately, and this is not a reflection on Colin or Linda or Michael or any of the key regulars. I'm gonna write this on. I'm gonna write this score on the basis of the 2 episodes. And unfortunately, it's a 3.
I thought you were going to say, I'm going to write the score for this episode on a piece of paper and slide it across the desk.
I honestly, I was expecting a piece of paper too, like a sort of Strictly paddle. I can't even say how low this is.
I felt almost embarrassed with giving that score, but I'm not. It's a 3.
A 3. So that's worse than the Power of Kroll.
Yes, which is why I wish I'd never scored the Power of Kroll 4 now, I feel. But no, it's a 3.
Okay. So James, what is your score on the door for The Ultimate Foe?
Well, in this occasion, I am in total agreement with Jason. I think this episode would have scored more highly if you took stuff out of it rather than added everything in the kitchen sink and a bit of costume jewelry. So I also scored this a very unsatisfactory ending of a 3.
I am shooketh. I think you're both stingy underscorers.
Ooh.
Oh.
I'm just going to do that one more time.
Are you gonna? Is that open? Are you going to eat that?
Yeah, there's proper Marmite here. I'm a big lover of Marmite, as you know. I say it quite regularly, but yes, this is an open jar of Marmite.
Yeah, well, get a spoon and have a couple of mouthfuls of that whilst I think of a score.
No, I'm not going to do that. I think you need to come up with your score.
My score for Doctor Who and The Ultimate Foe. It's 4. I've given it the same as The Mysterious Planet. I think it's fine. It's not great. It's not atrocious. It's not mind warp. It's just unsatisfactory. It feels like there are lots of ends that aren't tidied and finalized, and a lot of great talent acting wise sort of wasted on screen that could have been doing happy things. I understand the background to it. I understand the problems in scripting, and I understand all of that. But after 14 weeks of storyline, it doesn't end where you'd want it to end, or where it could end. The potential, there's lots of things thrown up in potentially, and it's not realized. So I feel a bit mean to have scored so many things so badly today. Again, at pain's sake, I think a 4 in a Doctor Who scale is like a 20 on a Love Island scale. It's kind of like, it's just within what I would watch. I like to base it on what I would watch Doctor Who wise, and I don't get days where I'm sat thinking I need to watch Mind Warp. Unless we've got an actor coming to one of our events, in which case, and then I can tell them that it's my favorite. But I don't choose to I don't bother with the 4s and the 3s when I'm just watching.
And I think this is one of those seasons that it is genuinely a Marmite season. I use the phrase, but I think there are lovers of this season. There are people who don't like this season, and this is where I think everyone's views are their own, and everyone's got an opinion. And this is a great opportunity for people to drop the comments below, as we keep saying, because we're giving you our idea of what the scores are, but we'd love to hear what other people think of it outside of this. But we have to rate it on what we see, and I'm with you on this one. Whilst the scores aren't high, whilst the scores aren't particularly high for the season, that's not a reflection against anything or anyone in particular.
It's not. There was so many things going on around the production of this, and so rewrites and stuff that was happening behind the scenes politically, that it is such a shame that this opportunity didn't turn out the way that it should have. And but in the midst of that, you've got the Vervoid story, which showed so much promise. It's just a shame it wasn't replicated across the rest of the season.
So, in summary of the scores here, our 4th placed story was Mind Warp with 8.5. 3rd place was Ultimate Foe with 10. 2nd place, Mysterious Planet with 14. And the winner, Terror of the Vervoids, with 22.
Deservedly of the season.
Quite a runaway winner there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for debating season 23. I mean, we will be back If anyone has any seasons they would particularly like us to visit next, put those in the comments below. Can't guarantee we'll act on them, but do put them in the comments below. So thank you, James, thank you, Jason.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Glad to have been here again.
Time to stop the Matrix. Oh, okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.